Welcome back, comic lore lovers. Tonight, we explore a question that has haunted fans for decades. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story carry you away. Imagine, if you will, a different kind of morning in a secret Brooklyn laboratory, bathed in the soft, clinical glow of early dawn. The air is thick with anticipation. The hum of sophisticated machinery, a low, reassuring thrum against the rhythmic beat of a worried heart. Our hero, Steve Rogers, a young man defined by a spirit too vast for his fragile frame, lies strapped to a table. His eyes, clear pools of unwavering conviction, gaze at the ceiling, unblinking. He trusts in this moment, in the science, in the dream of becoming more than just a symbol. The super soldier serum flows into his veins, a liquid promise of strength, speed, and endurance. We hold our breath, knowing the history, the legend that was forged in this very room. But tonight, we invite you to drift into a world where that legend took a profoundly different turn. What if, after the initial jolt, after the strained muscles and accelerated breath, the transformation never truly took hold? What if the miracle faltered, leaving the scrawny boy from Brooklyn, though still valiant, still fundamentally unchanged in body? The quiet whirring of the machines continues, a stark counterpoint to the growing silence in the room, as the scientists' faces shift from hopeful anticipation to a dawning, crushing disappointment. The glow fades, the tremors subside, and Steve, though perhaps a shade more alert, a flicker of heightened senses, remains Steve, the scrawny kid from Brooklyn. No towering muscles, no impossible strength, just the same slender frame, the same unyielding heart, now burdened by the weight of a failed miracle. The hope, so vibrant moments ago, begins to curdle into despair for a world desperate for a champion. This quiet failure echoes across the Atlantic, reaching the battlefields where Hydra's shadow grows longer, more menacing. In this timeline, the beacon of a super soldier never fully ignites. The global conflict rages on, fueled by human endurance alone. Every trench and every city block a testament to the raw, unaugmented courage of ordinary people. The war effort, already strained, now lacks its intended symbol of invincible might, its impossible hope. The world leans heavier, the nights grow colder, and the burden of heroism falls not to a titan, but to the determined, fragile shoulders of a boy who refused to yield. Yet within that quiet defeat, a different seed of hope began to sprout. The true strength of Captain America, we always knew, wasn't merely in his brawn, but in his spirit, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to justice. Even without the serum's full physical enhancement, that spirit remained. Perhaps, in this darker timeline, brute force was not an option. Steve's keen intellect, his tactical brilliance, and his innate ability to inspire would become his shield, his true power. The iconic uniform, once designed to cloak an invincible hero, would now adorn a different kind of champion. One who navigates the war's desperate landscape not with punches, but with precision, not with invulnerability, but with cunning. His uniform might be tattered, his shield dented, a testament to countless skirmishes against impossible odds, but his resolve would only harden. This is the world we delve into, a world where Captain America is forged not in super strength, but in pure, unadulterated human courage. A world where a scrawny kid leads the charge against the insurmountable, proving that true heroism transcends the physical, burning brighter in the face of overwhelming darkness. Let's settle deeper into this quiet contemplation as the fog of an alternate history begins to swirl around us, revealing the untold story of the boy who became a legend. Against all odds, the hushed murmurs in the infirmary began to fade, replaced by the soft glow of a single lamp. Steve, no longer on the sterile gurney, but seated on the edge of a narrow cot, watched the last doctor retreat. His body, still slight, felt a peculiar quietude after the serum's brief, abortive surge. But his mind, always restless, now hummed with a different kind of energy, sifting through the strategic implications of his unchanged physique. On a nearby chair, a uniform made of sturdy canvas and adorned with the Stark Star lay folded, a uniform now too large in its symbolic expectations, yet still a silent, insistent call. Time drifted by in the hushed, cavernous spaces of the strategist's war room. The rhythmic rustle of maps and the low murmur of voices became Steve's new battlefield symphony. Days turned into nights, punctuated by the scratching of pencils and the shifting of markers on oversized maps. He was no longer the subject of medical scrutiny, but a quiet, intense presence bent over tables strewn with intelligence reports. His uncanny ability to predict enemy movements, to identify subtle vulnerabilities in Hydra's seemingly impenetrable defenses, began to draw the attention of the initially skeptical command. He would trace lines with a steady finger, his suggestions concise, startlingly accurate, transforming raw data into precise, actionable intelligence, revealing the true power of an unaugmented mind. The vibranium shield, a circular marvel of indestructible alloy, lay cool and heavy in Steve's lap. It was too unwieldy for his frame to wield as a conventional weapon in direct combat. Yet, its intrinsic qualities held immense potential. He ran a thoughtful hand over its smooth, unblemished surface, his mind already envisioning its transformation. No longer just a defensive plate or a blunt instrument, he began to sketch its future on a pad of paper, perhaps a deployable cover for reconnaissance, or a unique signaling device, its resonant properties manipulated for communication, or even as a tactical point of defense for a small, agile team. The physical shield was simply a tool. His true strength lay in the unconventional strategies he could devise for its use, for the war, and for the world that still desperately needed a captain. The skeptical glances in the war room slowly melted into nods of recognition, then outright reliance. Steve, always the last to leave, now found himself sought out first for crucial decisions. His gaunt frame cast a long shadow on the maps, a stark contrast to the colossal plans taking shape under his steady gaze. He began to feel the weight of expectation, not just as a symbol, but as the architect of their desperate hopes. His uniform, initially a symbolic gesture, now became his practical working attire, subtly altered to fit his purpose. Even as the nights bled into each other, the quiet hum of the map room became a sanctuary of thought for Steve. He often found himself alone in the pre-dawn hours, the city outside still shrouded in wartime blackout, connecting threads of intelligence that seemed invisible to others. A simple, repurposed desk lamp cast a pool of soft light on his work, revealing the intricate patterns of enemy movements he was piecing together. This was his battlefield, fought with patience and an unyielding mind, a silent vigil that shaped the unseen tides of war. The sanctuary of thought began to subtly expand, no longer a solitary space. Other officers, initially wary, now approached with their own bundles of reports, seeking Steve's quiet insight. They would observe, then tentatively adopt his color-coded pins, his precise annotations, and the almost meditative way he connected seemingly disparate pieces of information. The low hum of the map room deepened, now punctuated by the soft shuffle of multiple hands consulting maps, tracing the invisible lines of his strategy. He noticed new, repurposed lamps appearing on adjacent tables, mirroring his own, casting pools of amber light that danced across freshly marked territories. A sense of shared purpose, quiet and unspoken, began to settle into the pre-dawn hours, transforming his solitary vigil into a collective, intellectual front against the encroaching darkness. He had, without consciously trying, begun to teach them how to see. The shift was palpable, moving from quiet adoption to explicit reliance. General Phillips, a man whose stern gaze could typically fell an ox, now found himself regularly seeking Steve's counsel, often in the late hours when the world outside truly slept. The general would pull a chair close to Steve's modest desk, the polished leather creaking softly under his weight, a stark contrast to Steve's gaunt frame. Their conversations were never long, but always weighty, distilled to the raw essence of strategy. Steve's voice, though soft, carried an undeniable authority in these moments, his words laying out precise vulnerabilities in Hydra's seemingly unbreachable fortresses. The weight of these discussions, the understanding that entire campaigns hinged on his unaugmented insights, pressed down on him, not with a crushing force, but with a quiet, ever-present gravity, a testament to the colossal responsibility now resting on his slender shoulders. The amber glow from Steve's repurposed desk lamp fell across a newly unfurled map of continental Europe. His slender fingers, surprisingly steady despite the persistent tremor that occasionally ghosted through them, moved with an artist's precision, placing small, hand-painted wooden markers, tiny, crude representations of battalions and supply lines, onto key choke points. General Phillips, a silent sentinel, watched, his breath held. Steve's gaze, intense and unblinking, traced the invisible lines of Hydra's advances, then shifted to potential countermoves, his mind already 3 steps ahead. Each pin, each tiny marker, was a whispered hypothesis, a quiet defiance against the overwhelming tide. He meticulously adjusted a red pin, marking a suspected munitions depot, a vulnerability no one else had considered. The air itself seemed to thicken with the weight of that single, deliberate movement. A fragile hope pinned to a paper map. The general's chair creaked once more as he finally rose, his departure a soft echo in the now silent room. Steve remained, an almost imperceptible tremor passing through his hands as he traced the outline of a particularly aggressive Hydra advance. The low hum of the distant city, muffled by the thick walls, seemed to carry the weight of countless unseen struggles. He moved to the small, grimy window, looking out into the pre-dawn gloom. The city below, normally a beacon, was shrouded in a strategic blackout. Only the faint, far-off glow of a distant factory or a hidden encampment breaking the oppressive darkness. It was a bleak canvas, a reminder of the relentless fight and the silent, heavy expectation that now accompanied every strategic decision he made. A profound sense of responsibility settled deep in his core. Steve turned slowly from the window, the oppressive darkness outside doing little to calm the thrum of strategic puzzles in his mind. He moved back to the war table, his gaze falling upon a set of tactical schematics he'd drawn himself, outlining a daring, almost reckless infiltration plan. His fingers, thin and calloused from countless hours of sketching and writing, traced the faint, penciled lines of a suspected Hydra research facility, a place no conventional force could ever hope to breach. His plan wasn't about overwhelming force, but surgical precision, a quiet whisper in the ear of a giant. He reached for a small, unassuming leather-bound journal lying beside his compass, its cover worn smooth from constant handling. Inside, meticulously scribbled notes detailed Hydra's internal communication patterns, security rotations, and even the subtle psychological profiles of key officers. Intel gathered through painstaking, often dangerous, observation, and a network of quiet allies. It was a weapon of knowledge, carefully honed, more potent than any gun in his hands. Next to the journal, leaning against a stack of maps, was his shield. Not the gleaming, iconic disc of propaganda posters, but a utilitarian vibranium plate, its surface dull matte blue, marked with a few scrapes and dents, its edges subtly reshaped for deflecting energy blasts rather than impacting foes. He ran a gloved hand over its cool, smooth surface, feeling the silent strength within the metal. It was a tool, a symbol, a beacon of defiant hope in the black, repurposed for a war fought not with fists, but with wit and unwavering spirit. Steve opened the worn journal, its aged leather cover creaking softly. The thin pages, filled with his precise, almost microscopic script, were a testament to countless sleepless nights spent piecing together fragmented reports and whispered rumors. Each entry was a small victory, a sliver of understanding wrested from the pervasive fog of war. He paused at a page detailing a particularly elusive Hydra operative, a shadowy figure known only as the Weaver, whose network seemed to stretch across occupied Europe like a malignant vine. Steve's finger, lightly calloused, traced the intricate web of connections he had meticulously mapped, each line a potential thread to pull, a vulnerability to exploit. The air in the room, still and heavy, seemed to absorb the immense intellectual effort encapsulated within those pages, a silent monument to a different kind of frontline courage. His gaze lifted from the journal, settling on the tactical schematics again, but now with a fresh layer of insight. The Weaver's patterns, once a perplexing knot, began to unravel in his mind, revealing a potential weakness in the Hydra facility's perimeter. He reached for a well-used drafting pencil, its lead worn short from constant use, and made a subtle alteration to his infiltration plan, a shift in a patrol route, a new approach point that leveraged a blind spot in the Weaver's carefully constructed web. It was a minor adjustment on paper, yet in the field, it could be the difference between a silent success and a catastrophic failure. The responsibility of that infinitesimal line, drawn by his own hand, pressed down on him a heavy, silent weight that only he could bear. A deep, almost imperceptible sigh escaped him, not of weariness, but of preparation. He closed the journal, placing it carefully back beside the compass, a symbol of the guidance and direction he provided, not with brute force, but with meticulously gathered knowledge. His gaze lingered briefly on a small, framed photo tucked away in a corner of the table. A faded image of his mother, her kind eyes reflecting a quiet strength that he now carried into every decision. The city outside remained a canvas of muted darkness. Yet, in this small, hidden room, a quiet resolve solidified. The path ahead was perilous, fraught with unseen dangers. But Steve knew that courage wasn't about the absence of fear, but the unwavering commitment to act despite it. Armed with intellect and an unbreakable will, the small modifications to the plan now lay etched into Steve's mind. A new path forward born from observation and deduction. He rose from his desk, the faint light of the utility lamp casting long, wavering shadows across his lean frame. With a quiet resolve, he began the methodical process of preparing for the night's work. Each piece of equipment, from the reinforced but lightweight tactical vest to the precisely weighted throwing knives, was inspected, secured, and then carefully placed. His uniform, a muted, battle-worn version of the star-spangled design, was adjusted, its fabric familiar against his skin. He moved with an economical grace, the calm before the storm manifest in his every deliberate action. The cold, damp air of the European night pressed in as Steve moved through the war-scarred outskirts of the occupied city. Rubble-strewn streets and the skeletal remains of buildings loomed against a sky bruised with distant artillery flares, momentarily illuminating the oppressive urban decay. He kept to the deepest shadows, his presence a whisper in the wind, a phantom against the backdrop of destruction. Every shattered window, every collapsed wall, offered a potential vantage point or a hidden danger. His senses, sharpened by countless covert operations, cataloged the rhythmic rumble of distant patrols and the fainter, more unsettling silence between. He was small, almost insignificant in this vast, hostile landscape, yet his mind, meticulously mapping every sound and sight, was a beacon of intent, navigating the chaos with an almost supernatural precision. Finally, from a concealed perch overlooking the sprawling Hydra facility, Steve settled into position. The compound, a brutalist fortress of concrete and steel, pulsed with a low hum of power, its perimeter dotted with the cold glow of searchlights. But even through the oppressive display of might, his gaze, sharp and unyielding, sought out the flaw. The subtle shift in the patrol route, the brief, predictable lag in a camera's sweep. The overgrown section of wall, partially hidden by dead vines, the blind spot the weaver had inadvertently left. It was a minuscule opening, a threadbare patch in a seemingly impenetrable tapestry. But it was enough. Steve allowed himself a quiet, almost imperceptible nod of satisfaction. The intellectual victory, now poised to become a physical one, relying solely on his wits and the silent, unyielding courage that defined him. The rhythmic, heavy thud of marching boots grew subtly closer, a dull, resonant echo against the shattered stone. Steve pressed himself deeper into the concave shadow of a partially collapsed archway, his breath shallow and controlled. He didn't need to see them to know their formation. The precise, unhurried cadence of a Hydra patrol. A single, focused beam of a flashlight cut a harsh, probing swath through the dust-laden air, sweeping across the debris-strewn street. It lingered momentarily on a twisted piece of rebar, just inches from his hidden face, then continued its methodical arc, a slow, searching eye in the pervasive gloom. His small stature, usually a perceived weakness, became his greatest asset in these moments, allowing him to melt into crevices and overlooked spaces that larger men would never fit. Once the last echo of their boots had faded into the oppressive quiet, Steve moved. He didn't sprint or lunge, but rather flowed with an economical grace that belied his lean build, a quick, almost imperceptible scaling of a crumbled wall, using handholds that only he seemed to notice, lifted him silently onto a precarious ledge. The cold, rough texture of the broken concrete offered a momentary anchor before he continued his upward ascent. Each movement was a calculated whisper against the backdrop of the night, a silent defiance of the physical limitations that would have grounded other men. His path was a ballet of evasion, a careful dance around the danger that lay beneath him. He reached a precarious rooftop, the wind a soft sigh around him, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant smoke. Below, the sprawling, fractured silhouette of the occupied city stretched into the hazy distance, punctuated by the occasional flicker of emergency lights, or the brief, orange glow of a distant factory furnace. In the heart of this urban desolation, standing stark against the bruised sky, was his objective. A hulking, imposing structure, its reinforced walls and towering antennae betraying its purpose as a key Hydra research facility. The weight of his mission settled over him, not as a crushing burden, but as a silent, unwavering resolve, a steady flame against the encroaching darkness. From his hidden perch high above the silent streets, Steve meticulously observed the distant, methodical movements of the Hydra patrol. A sudden, subtle shift in their cadence, A slight deviation from their established route caught his trained eye. This change, barely noticeable to anyone else, signaled a potential alteration in their local operations, perhaps a new target or a fresh directive. The keen, cold wind whispered past his ears, carrying the faint, metallic tang of distant smoke and the heavy, damp scent of disturbed earth. His mind, a precise instrument, began to remap the risks, calculating new approach vectors and escape routes within the skeletal remains of the city. His small, gloved fingers found purchase on the crumbling stone, his lean frame a study in stillness, a silent guardian against the elements and the darkness. As his gaze swept across the ruined landscape, a faint, rhythmic flicker caught his attention, emanating from the shadowed depths of a partially destroyed municipal building. It wasn't the harsh glare of a flashlight, but a soft, pulsating glow, too deliberate to be accidental, piercing the dust-laden air through a jagged gap in the rubble. A cautious surge of hope, a rare warmth in the pervasive chill, spread through him. This delicate pulse could be the signal he'd been sent to find, a fragile beacon from an allied contact, a whisper of defiance deep within the occupied zone. His sharp eyes absorbed every detail, committing the precise timing and location of the elusive light to the intricate mental map of the city he carried. With newfound purpose, Steve began his careful descent, his lithe body a fleeting shadow against the darker tones of the wall. Each handhold was tested, each foot placed with the deliberate quietness of a cat, his movements a testament to honed agility rather than brute strength. His worn, practical uniform, designed for blending into the urban decay, became an almost invisible extension of the night. The dented vibranium shield, a reassuring, familiar weight strapped firmly to his back, hummed faintly with a silent promise of steadfast resolve. He moved towards the distant, pulsing light, a slender, determined figure weaving through the spectral remnants of a war-torn world, a beacon of quiet hope. The pulsing light, a delicate heartbeat in the city's ruin, pulled Steve from his high vantage point. He began his descent with a practiced ease, each movement economical, each grip on the crumbling facade assured. His lean frame, though lacking the bulk of a super soldier, was a testament to relentless training and an innate understanding of leverage and balance. The wind, no longer a whisper, but a low sigh, tugged at his worn uniform, threatening to expose him to the unseen eyes of the Hydra patrols below. He moved like a shadow detaching from the night, a barely perceptible ripple in the pervasive darkness, his every fiber focused on the promise of that distant, fragile glow. The metallic tang of smoke grew stronger with each meter he dropped, a testament to the city's enduring scars. He landed softly on a debris-strewn ledge, the sound of his boots barely a whisper against the omnipresent crackle of settling dust and broken stone. The municipal building, closer now, revealed more of its shattered dignity. Twisted rebar protruded like skeletal fingers, and gaping holes offered glimpses into its dark, hollowed-out interior. The rhythmic flicker continued, guiding him through a maze of fallen masonry and half-collapsed walls. He detected the subtle scent of old paper and something metallic, perhaps from broken pipes or forgotten machinery, lingering in the cool night air. There was a quietness here that felt too profound, a stillness that suggested either abandonment or meticulous concealment. This was not merely a ruin. It was a carefully chosen stage. He found an entry point, a jagged tier in what was once a grand entrance, now choked with rubble. Slipping through the narrow gap, Steve moved into the building's interior. The air inside was heavy, thick with the scent of damp concrete and the metallic tang of rust. The pulsating light, now clearer and slightly brighter, emanated from deeper within the structure, a rhythmic wink against the oppressive darkness. His shield, modified for silent traversal rather than brute force, was secured to his back, a constant, comforting weight. He paused, listening, the fragile glow, now within reach, illuminated not a hidden arsenal or a grand command center, but a small, carefully preserved archive nestled deep within the municipal building's fractured heart. Among the settling dust and the ghostly echoes of ruin, Steve found maps marked with the faded paths of forgotten resistance cells, and journals filled with coded messages, each entry a testament to a quiet, enduring defiance. His lean fingers traced the faded ink, absorbing the untold stories of those who, like him, fought without fanfare, without superhuman strength, but with an unyielding belief in a better tomorrow. The subtle scent of old paper mingled with the subtle, comforting aroma of wood smoke from a distant, hidden hearth, a fleeting sign of life clinging to the edges of pervasive despair. He stood, a silent sentinel, his own weariness a dull ache beneath the surge of renewed purpose. The quiet hum of his radio, barely a whisper against the profound silence of the liberated knowledge. This was his true battlefield, a labyrinth of information, where every discovered truth was a small, quiet victory against the overwhelming tide of tyranny. In a world starved for larger-than-life champions, it wasn't the thunderous roar of a superhuman, but the resolute whisper of a scrawny kid that echoed deepest, rippling through the darkest corners of the occupied zones. His legend, forged not in enhanced might, but in relentless will, in sharp intellect, and in the unwavering courage of a truly good heart, spread through the shadows, a quiet beacon for the downtrodden, every rescued prisoner, every critical piece of intelligence delivered, every precise act of sabotage against the sprawling Hydra machine became a vital thread woven into a growing tapestry of resistance, the sheer, audacious image of a man who faced super soldiers with only his wits, a tactical mind sharper than any blade, and a vibranium shield, chipped and scarred from countless engagements, inspired a desperate populace to find their own hidden courage. He became a symbol not of what humanity could be if altered by science, but of what it always was: tenacious, defiant, and eternally hopeful, even when hope seemed a distant, fading star. The cold, metallic scent of the war-torn city gradually softened, replaced by the faint, earthy smell of resilience pushing through cracked pavement, of new life determined to surface. And so, the legend of Captain America, the scrawny kid who defied every expectation, became etched not in feats of impossible strength, but in the unwavering resilience of his indomitable spirit. He never grew taller, never grew stronger, never possessed the physical prowess of his foes, but his moral presence cast a shadow larger than any Goliath, a shadow of quiet defiance that even Hydra's darkest machinations could not extinguish. The war continued its grinding, relentless pace, but the embers of resistance he fanned, the seeds of hope he planted, would never truly die. As the city finally succumbed to the quiet, heavy embrace of the late hours, a gentle stillness settled, broken only by the soft, rhythmic patter of a slow, cold drizzle against broken glass and crumbling stone. It was the sound of a world beginning to heal, slowly, painstakingly, under the quiet guardianship of a man who proved that true power lay not in the muscle, but in the deep, resonant strength of the heart, and in the quiet, persistent courage to never, ever give up. The faint, hopeful scent of burgeoning life under the city's scars, a delicate aroma of damp earth and new growth pushing through cracked pavement, was a quiet promise that echoed in the makeshift sanctuary Steve now occupied deep within the labyrinthine tunnels beneath what was once a grand municipal library. The air was cool and still, carrying only the whisper of forced ventilation and the distant, rhythmic drip of water into unseen cisterns. His sanctuary, a carefully organized alcove carved from disused archives, served as his primary command post, illuminated by a single, low-wattage bulb that cast long, soft shadows across the stacked crates and the intricate sprawl of maps. The vibranium shield, its surface dulled and chipped by the grit of countless skirmishes, leaned against a wooden crate near his makeshift desk, a silent testament to battles fought with wit and daring. Rather than brute brawn, he sat hunched over a spread of faded blueprints detailing enemy strongholds, his thin fingers tracing lines of Hydra supply routes with an almost surgical precision, his mind already many steps ahead, meticulously dissecting their seemingly impenetrable defenses, the subtle scent of old, yellowed paper, and the metallic tang of fresh ink from his tactical annotations mingled with the fainter, almost imperceptible aroma of antiseptic from a recent minor wound, a quiet, almost constant reminder of his persistent vulnerability, yet also his persistent survival beyond the immediate strategy unfolding on the maps. Steve's gaze often drifted to the worn radio equipment that occupied a nearby crate, a vital conduit to the scattered nodes of his resistance network. Its dull, anodized metal casing, scarred by countless uses and transfers, hummed almost imperceptibly with a low, steady frequency, a constant, reassuring reminder of the unseen web of connections he had painstakingly woven across occupied territories. He pictured the faces, unseen, but vividly imagined, of those who listened on the other end. The quiet engineers maintaining hidden power grids, the resourceful scavengers retrieving critical components, the courageous couriers navigating treacherous checkpoints, all bound by the fragile, yet enduring thread of hope he represented. His communiques, always brief, precise, and layered with encrypted riddles, were a secret language of defiance, understood only by the initiated, whispered through the static-laced ether, the faint, clean scent of ozone from the radio's warm, vacuum tubes, blended with the ever-present, earthy dust of the tunnels, creating a unique, almost nostalgic aroma of covert operations and desperate ingenuity. With a gentle, deliberate touch, he adjusted a finely tuned dial, the soft, rhythmic click echoing slightly in the profound stillness, confirming the readiness of a specific, critical channel. The soft, rhythmic click of the radio dial settled the air, a small punctuation mark in the profound stillness of the underground chamber. Steve exhaled slowly, the cool, damp air of the bunker filling his lungs, carrying the faint, earthy scent of disturbed soil and distant, forgotten minerals. He leaned back slightly from the rough-hewn table, the stiff, patched fabric of his modified uniform rustling with the movement, a quiet protest against the constant strain, the dim, flickering glow of a single, caged bulb overhead cast long, dancing shadows across the cavernous space, illuminating the uneven rock walls etched with centuries of subterranean memory. Streaks of moisture catching the feeble light like ancient tears on the table before him, alongside the intricate, hand-drawn maps and the array of communication equipment, lay a half-eaten, stale ration bar, its plain wrapper peeled back, revealing the dull, unappetizing contents. He hadn't touched it for hours. His focus, an unyielding force against the constant gnawing of exhaustion and hunger. The demands of the network far outweighing his own physical needs. The faint, steady hum of the radio and the distant, muffled thrum of generators blended into a low, almost subconscious rhythm of their hidden existence, a constant reminder of the world they fought for and against. Steve pushed the ration bar further aside, his focus now drifting fully to the cluster of meticulously drawn maps spread across the rough-hewn surface of the table. These were no standard military charts. They were personalized, hand-annotated with a spiderweb of cryptic symbols, hastily scribbled notes, and faint, smudged finger trails marking potential routes and danger zones, each a whisper of intelligence, a hint of enemy movement. His slender fingers, though not calloused from heavy labor, were stained with ink and the faint grime of constant work, a testament to the countless hours spent poring over intelligence reports, deciphering communiques, and plotting their next critical moves. He traced a line across a topographical contour, a hypothetical path through enemy-held territory, his brow furrowed in concentration, a silent battle raging in his mind. The chill of the bunker seemed to sharpen his intellect, forcing an almost hyper-awareness of every detail, every potential variable, every subtle shift in the strategic landscape. A quiet shiver traced its way up Steve's spine, not from the pervasive cold of the underground chamber, but from the immense, chilling weight of the strategic puzzle unfolding before him. He shifted slightly, the small movement highlighting the worn, patched areas of his uniform, a testament to its constant use, the countless scrapes, and the brutal scarcity of resources in their desperate war. He had no towering physique to intimidate, no superhuman strength to overcome impossible odds, only an unyielding spirit and a mind that refused to break. A quiet forge of resilience, the very silence of the bunker, broken only by the distant hums and soft clicks of equipment, was a stark reminder of their precarious existence, a whispered secret against the thunderous roar of a world consumed by war and despair. He often thought of Bucky, not as the robust soldier he might have become, but as the steady, loyal friend who would have understood the quiet battles fought with cunning and resolve rather than brute force. This alternate path, this unique legacy he was forging, was built not on a serum-enhanced individual, but on the collective strength of ordinary people, amplified by extraordinary coordination and shared hope. His gaze, usually so open and earnest, now held the sharp glint of a strategist, honed by countless sleepless nights, and the grim realities of a world teetering on the edge. The rough fabric of his modified uniform, a practical, unadorned version of the familiar blue and red, bore subtle signs of wear. A faint fray at the cuff, a faded patch where a pocket had been reinforced. It wasn't the uniform of a parade ground hero, but of a quiet, relentless operative, one who moved in shadows and fought battles of the mind. The cold, unyielding rock of the bunker pressed in around him, a constant, tangible reminder of their precarious existence. Yet, he found a strange comfort in its stoic silence. It was a space where his thoughts could expand, unfettered by the clamor of the world above, allowing him to weave complex tapestries of strategy from the threads of intelligence he gathered. A fresh set of encrypted dispatches, delivered moments before through a pneumatic tube system carved into the rock, lay neatly stacked beside his elbow, awaiting his review. He would absorb each word, each cryptic phrase, sifting through the noise for the kernels of truth that could turn the tide. His shield in this stark reality was not a vibrant disk of vibranium, but the unyielding fortress of his mind, constantly assessing, adapting, protecting his few remaining allies with the sheer force of his intellect. The faint, rhythmic click of a nearby Morse code machine, almost imperceptible against the drone of the generators, pulsed with distant whispers of their network, a lifeline of data connecting their disparate cells across the ravaged continent. Each signal, however faint, was a new piece of the vast, deadly puzzle he was compelled to solve. His slender frame a crucible for the immense pressure of their shared defiance. He allowed himself a single, slow breath, a conscious effort to steady the rapid pulse of his thoughts. The chill air, though sharp, was clean, tasting faintly of damp earth and the metallic tang of old machinery. The single, bare bulb hanging above the table cast a stark, unforgiving light on the maps. Yet, in its focused beam, details came into sharper relief. Pathways and enemy positions starkly illuminated. This was his battlefield, the complex terrain of information, the shifting tides of enemy intent. There were no shouts of command, no grand charges, only the quiet, unrelenting grind of intellect against overwhelming force. And yet, in this unassuming bunker, in this scrawny, determined man, lay the fragile, burning ember of hope for a world that had all but forgotten what it felt like to be truly free. His quiet presence was a defiant challenge, a silent promise whispered against the roar of Hydra's advancing shadow. Steve reached for the topmost dispatch, his fingers, surprisingly strong despite their slender appearance, carefully uncreasing the delicate paper. It detailed a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in Hydra troop movements near a vital alpine supply route. His keen eyes, sharp and unwavering, traced the annotated coordinates, his mind already calculating potential countermaneuvers, weighing risks against the meager resources available. The faint scent of stale paper and printing ink, a familiar prelude to the complex mental battles he waged daily, filled the cool, still air around him. A low, persistent hum, almost imperceptible against the drone of the distant generators, emanated from a nearby console. Its bank of gently glowing vacuum tubes cast a soft, pulsing orange light onto a detailed, illuminated map spread across a heavy, scratched table. The map depicted the ravaged European continent, a mosaic of Allied and Hydra markers, their positions in constant, silent flux. Steve shifted his gaze, correlating the new dispatch information with the broader strategic picture. The map, a silent, unwavering confidant in his solitary, desperate vigil. As his eyes scanned the flickering projections, the map revealed a newly marked red arrow, bold and menacing, pointing towards a seemingly weakly defended coastal position in the Adriatic. It was a feint, he surmised with a quiet certainty, or a calculated risk designed to draw attention. The true target, he knew, would be elsewhere, cloaked by this obvious, exaggerated threat. His slender fingers tapped a light, rhythmic pattern on the table's worn edge. A silent countdown as he began to piece together Hydra's true intention. Feeling the immense, crushing weight of the continent's fate pressing down on his still scrawny shoulders, Steve's mind, a quiet storm of strategy, began to weave through the myriad possibilities, each one a thread in the complex tapestry of war. He mentally overlaid the new Hydra data onto the established Allied positions, his focus narrowing on the thin, almost imperceptible line where the enemy's flanks might be exposed, a vulnerable seam in their otherwise formidable armor. The faint, rhythmic tremor of the distant generators vibrated through the worn floorboards beneath his thin, sturdy boots, a constant, low reminder of the fragile, improvised infrastructure supporting their desperate fight. He considered the painfully limited number of operatives they could spare, their faces, though unseen, a blur of tired but resolute determination in his mind's eye. He factored in the immense distance, the treacherous, snow-choked alpine terrain, the uncertain weather patterns of the coming days, and the dwindling, precious resources available for their every move. Each variable was meticulously weighed, balanced against the desperate need for a victory, however small, to keep the flickering flame of hope alive. His slender finger, calloused from countless hours, handling everything from salvaged radio equipment to intricate mechanical schematics, traced a specific mountain Pass on the illuminated map. This particular route, often deemed impassable by heavier Hydra vehicles due to its perilous inclines and narrow, winding paths, offered a slender, almost forgotten window for a small, highly agile team. A fine, almost imperceptible layer of dust, disturbed by the gentle brush of his skin, shimmered momentarily in the soft, pulsing orange glow cast by the bank of vacuum tubes, momentarily catching the light before settling back into stillness. The low hum of the console seemed to deepen slightly, a subtle shift in the ambient sound that only he, accustomed to every nuance and vibration of their clandestine base, would instinctively perceive as a slight fluctuation in power, or perhaps just the settling of the old machinery. This mountain pass, known locally as the Serpent's Tooth, was a legend among the villagers who once dotted these valleys, a path spoken of in hushed tones, reserved for the desperate or the truly daring. Steve knew it would be a gamble, demanding not just courage, but an almost suicidal level of ingenuity and stealth. This route, he knew, demanded not the brute strength and overwhelming firepower that Hydra so readily deployed, but rather a profound understanding of terrain, unparalleled stealth, and precision in execution, qualities often undervalued in the conventional war effort, but absolutely paramount in their desperate struggle against such overwhelming force. He recalled countless intelligence reports detailing Hydra's over-reliance on massive, brute force incursions, their vast convoys and heavily armored divisions, their predictable patterns of assault, their blind spots, he had observed repeatedly, lay precisely in areas requiring finesse, subtlety, and individual initiative. A single, almost silent drip of condensation from a corroded pipe overhead marked the passage of time. Each crystalline drop, a tiny, shimmering measure of the immense, silent pressure he carried. A constant, liquid metronome in the cool, still air, the weight of his decisions, though unseen by any other, was a palpable presence. A quiet burden he bore alone, a responsibility for every life committed to his tactical vision. He imagined the faces of the young men and women, often no older than himself, who would carry out this dangerous mission, their trust in him unwavering. Steve carefully pulled back from the map, his gaze sweeping over the three faces before him. Sergeant Barnes Bucky, his oldest friend, nodded, his expression a familiar blend of weariness and unyielding loyalty. Beside him, Private Jones, a quiet demolition expert, checked the straps on his worn pack, the faint clinking of his tools almost absorbed by the hum of the bass. Across from them, Corporal Anya Sharma, a sharp linguist and scout, meticulously cleaned the lens of her field glasses. Steve didn't need to speak. the weight of the mission, its near impossibility, hung unspoken in the air. He merely tapped the map again, a silent confirmation of the chosen path, and then began to quietly outline the first phase. The specific gear, the timings, the contingency plans for every imaginable misstep. Hours later, under a sky choked with heavy, bruised clouds that promised more snow, the small team moved like ghosts across the initial, gentler slopes. Each step was carefully placed. The soft crunch of their boots on the sparse, snow barely audible above the whisper of the wind through the skeletal pines. Steve, leaner than any soldier in their ranks, yet possessed of an uncanny endurance born of sheer will, led the way. His worn vibranium shield, stripped of its vibrant colors for tactical stealth, was strapped tightly to his back, a dull, metallic echo of its former glory. Bucky, ever vigilant, scanned the tree line, his breath misting in the frigid air, while Jones and Sharma maintained their quiet pace behind them, their movements economical and precise. The world around them was a study in muted grays and whites, vast and unforgiving, slowly swallowing the last faint glimmers of twilight. The cold seeped into their bones, a constant, dull ache, yet they pressed on, each focused on the single, daunting objective ahead. As the night deepened, the terrain grew harsher, the gentle slopes giving way to increasingly steep ascents and jagged rock formations. They reached the mouth of the Serpent's Tooth, a narrow, intimidating cleft in the mountainside that seemed to swallow the remaining light. Sheer black rock walls, streaked with frozen meltwater, rose on either side, their surfaces gleaming faintly in the pale moonlight that occasionally pierced the cloud cover. The wind here was a low, mournful howl, funneling through the pass, carrying with it the scent of ice and distant, burnt pine. Steve paused, his eyes narrowing as he studied the intricate natural defenses and the almost invisible signs of recent passage. A disturbed patch of snow, a faint scrape on rock. There was no direct evidence of Hydra yet, but the oppressive silence of the pass, broken only by the wind, spoke volumes. The gentle slopes gave way to a more rugged ascent. Jagged, dark rock formations, dusted with fresh snow, began to jut out from the earth like forgotten teeth. Steve paused at a narrow pass, his gaze sweeping the shadowy crevices and the wind-sculpted drifts, searching for any telltale sign of a hidden wire or disturbed snow. His thin fingers, despite the cold, traced the edge of his map, a silent calculation unfolding in his mind. The air grew thinner, the wind sharper, whispering secrets through the ancient stones. Bucky, anticipating Steve's unspoken command, moved to a higher vantage point, his rifle at the ready, a silent guardian against the vast emptiness. Steve meanwhile, pointed to a subtle discoloration on a distant rock face, a faint marring that only his artist's eye, honed by years of observation and sketching the world's hidden details, could discern. It was a faint indication, perhaps a recent rockfall or something more deliberate, a path recently disturbed. The team adjusted their route, a silent understanding passing between them, following the subtle cue of their leader's perception. Deeper into the mountain's embrace they ventured, the wind now carrying the faintest scent of wood smoke, mingled with the metallic tang of something unnatural. The air grew heavy, pressing in on them. They moved slower, each shadow a potential threat, each crevice a place where eyes might hide. Steve's hand instinctively went to the hilt of the compact knife sheathed at his belt. A small, cold comfort. The silence here was different. Not the peaceful hush of nature, but an ominous, waiting quiet, filled with the unspoken presence of their enemy. Following Steve's keen eye, the team diverged from the main ridge, finding themselves on a path far less traveled. A faint animal trail, perhaps, now partially obscured by recent snowfall. The air grew perceptibly colder, sharper, carrying the clean, biting scent of distant ice fields and ancient, resilient pine. Steve, though lean, moved with a surprising economy of motion, his worn boots finding purchase on loose scree and icy patches, with an innate understanding of the mountain's temperament. His focus was absolute, a quiet intensity in his pale blue eyes that belied his unassuming physique. They passed through a narrow defile, the rock walls rising steeply on either side, damp and slick with frozen runoff, amplifying the hushed crunch of their boots. The world here felt older, more elemental, a vast indifference to the human conflict unfolding across its face. Beyond the defile, the terrain eased into a broad, snow-covered plateau, stretching out under a sky that was a dizzying tapestry of stars. The air, now unimpeded by rock walls, grew even thinner, cleaner, carrying the faint, metallic taste of distant frost. Steve paused at the edge of the expanse, his breath a fragile plume against the cosmic grandeur. His gaze wasn't just on the physical landscape, but seemed to pierce through the vastness, weighing the strategic implications of every shadow, every undulation in the snow. His mind, always his sharpest weapon, worked tirelessly, dissecting the intel, mapping contingencies, anticipating the enemy's next move. It was a burden he carried not with a hero's swagger, but with the quiet resolve of a scholar facing an insurmountable problem, driven by an unshakable moral compass. Steve's blue eyes, though weary from days of relentless movement and minimal rest, held a profound depth as they traversed the star-dusted expanse of the plateau. high-altitude air, thin and biting, painted the tips of his ears and nose a faint crimson, a stark reminder of his human vulnerability against the unforgiving elements. He wasn't looking for obvious cover or easily exploitable terrain, not in the traditional sense, but for patterns, the subtle flow of wind-driven snow revealing hidden depressions, the barely perceptible dips and rises in the terrain that could betray a hidden approach, or conversely, offer a fleeting, unexpected advantage for their own infiltration. His mind, a finely honed instrument sharpened by countless hours of strategic study and battlefield improvisation, processed these myriad details with astonishing speed, weaving them into a complex, evolving tapestry of potential tactical maneuvers. The silence of the plateau was profound, a vast, indifferent emptiness broken only by the whisper of the wind and the soft, rhythmic beat of his own heart, a steady drum against the cosmic grandeur. He reached a decision, almost imperceptibly, his gaze settling on a cluster of ancient, wind-stunted junipers, clinging stubbornly to a low rise further out, their dark, twisted forms offering the scantest hint of concealment. Without a spoken word, the team began to adjust their course, a seamless, practiced shift of weight and direction, their movements economical and fluid. Each bootfall was measured, cautious, echoing Steve's own deliberate pace, designed to minimize sound and leave as little trace as possible on the pristine snow. The junipers, gnarled and ancient, offered little in the way of significant cover for a group of their size, but their shadowy forms against the starlight presented a fleeting visual anchor, a point of concentration in the overwhelming emptiness, a landmark for their methodical progression. Steve led, his form a slight silhouette against the vastness, not with the imposing presence of a superhuman, but with an almost spiritual conviction, a quiet, unshakable confidence that permeated the frigid air and instilled a calm focus in his team. His worn vibranium shield, a disc of dull, utilitarian metal slung across his back, seemed less a weapon of offense and more a symbol of persistent, unyielding resistance. Its tarnished, battle-scarred surface absorbing rather than reflecting the distant starlight, a testament to countless skirmishes and desperate defenses. He moved as if he knew every hidden stone, every treacherous whisper of wind, his intuition honed to an almost preternatural degree by years of surviving on intellect, shrewd observation, and wits alone. As they drew closer to the gnarled junipers, their twisted branches clawing at the starlit sky, a faint shimmer on the distant horizon caught Steve's trained eye. It was a brief, almost imperceptible ripple in the darkness, a momentary reflection perhaps, but it suggested distant movement, potential potentially a patrol, a vehicle, or an early warning system. His muscles tensed, a fleeting tightening of his slender frame. But his breathing remained even, controlled, a testament to years of suppressing any outward sign of stress. He raised a single hand, palm flat, a universal, silent sign to halt. The team froze instantly, their forms merging seamlessly with the shadows cast by the sparse vegetation and the low, snow-covered rocks, a testament to their disciplined training under his command and their deep understanding of his non-verbal cues. Sergeant Barnes, a silent shadow amongst shadows, moved slightly closer to Steve, his own breath held, a silent question in his posture that conveyed both readiness and unwavering trust. The junipers, though sparse, offered a meager respite from the wind's biting insistence, their twisted branches forming a low, natural huddle. Steve brought his team to a halt within their shadow, a collective intake of chilled air marking their pause. His gaze, keen and unblinking, swept the desolate expanse before them, searching for any anomaly in the starlit snow. The silence was profound, punctuated only by the distant, almost imagined sigh of the wind across the frozen plateau, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He moved his gloved hand to adjust the collar of his uniform, a simple, practical gesture against the pervasive cold. A low murmur from one of his men, a quiet report on their instruments, barely disturbed the frozen air. Steve acknowledged it with a slight nod, his attention still fixed on the distant, shimmering haze that marked the edge of their current mission zone. He recalled the countless briefing rooms, the sterile hum of the SSR laboratories, the anxious, hopeful faces watching as he lay on the table, thin and frail, beneath the whirring machinery. The memory was clear, precise, a film reel playing behind his eyes, the deep breath, the cold rush, the burning anticipation, and then nothing but a dull ache and the crushing weight of disappointment, not for himself, but for what the world needed. Colonel Phillips' sigh had been audible even over the whirring of the machines, a heavy, world-weary sound that echoed in Steve's ears long after. Dr. Erskine, his face a mask of profound sorrow, had simply offered a hand, a silent apology for the hope that had been briefly kindled and then extinguished. But in that moment, as the realization settled, a different kind of fire had ignited within Steve. Not the blazing inferno of enhanced strength, but the steady, unyielding warmth of resolve. He would still fight, just the distant hum of the SSR labs faded from his mind, replaced by the immediate, chilling reality of the frozen plateau. Steve shifted his gaze from the shimmering haze to the small, portable map spread across a flattened, ice-crusted rock. His gloved finger traced a path, thin and deliberate, over the topographical lines that spoke of unseen valleys and treacherous ridges. A faint red glow from a small, shielded tactical lantern held by one of his men cast just enough light to illuminate the crucial details without betraying their position. This was the true strength of his command now. Not brute force, but calculated navigation, leveraging every scrap of information, every learned nuance of terrain and enemy movement. His slight frame, often a vulnerability, seemed to vanish into the stark landscape as he bent over the map, his mind a quiet whirlwind of strategies. The cold seeped through his uniform, but his focus was absolute, a contained fire against the encroaching desolation. As he straightened, the worn vibranium shield strapped to his back scraped softly against the thick fabric of his uniform. It was not the gleaming symbol of defiance commonly imagined, but a dulled, almost matte gray disk, its surface a testament to countless impacts and desperate deflections, now merely absorbing the meager starlight rather than reflecting it. The edges were chipped, the paint scarred, a quiet story of close calls and improbable survivals etched into its very being. His uniform, too, was a departure from any parade ground ideal, practical, insulated, and designed for stealth in these harsh, desolate environments. It featured reinforced elbow and knee pads, numerous utility pouches, and a hood that could be pulled low against the wind. Every stitch spoke of adaptation, of making do, of transforming perceived weakness into a form of rugged, unyielding strength that sought no glory, only results. A quiet gesture from Steve, a slight inclination of his head towards the shimmering haze, was all that was needed. His point man, a gruff but loyal veteran named Corporal Davies, met his gaze with an understanding that transcended words, a silent acknowledgement of their shared history and the unspoken trust that bound them. Davies nodded once, a brief, sharp movement, before silently gesturing to the two men closest to him, indicating their subtle forward movement. There was no bellowed command, no heroic stance, just the quiet, almost invisible communication of a leader who had earned allegiance through sheer reliability and an unshakable belief in their cause. The cold wind continued its mournful song across the ice, but a ripple of quiet resolve passed through the small unit. They moved forward, a ghostly procession against the vast, indifferent landscape, each step carefully placed, each breath a shared testament to their grim determination. The metallic tang of the cold air filled Eve's lungs as he pushed off the icy rock. The map, now folded and secured in a watertight pouch, had given its secrets, and the path ahead lay etched in his mind as clearly as the lines on the paper. He moved first, a wraith-like figure against the muted canvas of snow and rock, his steps surprisingly light, almost imperceptible. Each footfall was placed with deliberate care, avoiding the crunch of fresh powder, bypassing treacherous ice sheets that might betray their presence. Behind him, the two men he led mirrored his silent precision, their breath pluming faintly in the frigid darkness, their forms blending with the deep shadows cast by the moonless night. This was their rhythm, a hushed ballet of survival orchestrated by a leader who knew the subtle language of the wilderness as intimately as he knew the enemy's tactical manuals. A few hours later, the silence intensified, deepening as they skirted the edge of a frozen ravine. Eve halted, his hand raised almost imperceptibly, his eyes scanning the horizon. The vast expanse of the frozen wastes stretched before them, a canvas of stark white and impenetrable shadow. Then he saw it, a flicker, a faint, rhythmic pulse of light far in the distance, barely visible against the inky sky, but too regular to be natural. It was a telltale signature, a silent beacon announcing a Hydra patrol, perhaps a mobile surveillance unit or a forward scouting party. His mind, a quiet storm of analysis, instantly began to process the implications: estimated distance, likely speed, potential patrol patterns, and the resources they might be carrying. The detour added hours to their journey, pushing them further into the biting wind that seemed to strip away warmth with every gust. Yet, Eve's resolve remained unwavering, a quiet, internal flame burning steadily. He was acutely aware of his own physical limitations, the persistent ache in his joints, the way the cold seemed to sink deeper into his bones than it did for his larger, more robust comrades. But these were familiar sensations, companions on a long, arduous journey, reminders of the path he had chosen, or perhaps the path that had chosen him. There was no room for self-pity, only the stark reality of the mission. Every step was a testament to sheer, unyielding will, a quiet defiance against the overwhelming odds. Eve's gaze remained fixed on the distant flicker, the rhythmic pulse now a faint, almost subconscious beat against the vast quiet that enveloped them. His mind, usually a whirlwind of tactical calculations, seemed to slow, expanding to absorb every detail the frigid night offered, sifting through the layers of information as effortlessly as the wind sifted snow. He wasn't just seeing a light. He was discerning its precise frequency, the subtle signature of its power source, the telltale hum of its motor. He envisioned the silhouette of a specific Hydra vehicle model, perhaps an armored reconnaissance half-track, and with it, the likely number of occupants, the subtle nuances of their operational doctrine. even the glint of their standard-issue weaponry under the vehicle's weak illumination. This wasn't the brute force of a marching army. It was the chilling precision of a surgical strike, a reconnaissance probe sent ahead to soften the ground, or perhaps to verify intelligence gathered through other, unseen means. The wind, a constant, biting presence, whispered past his ears, carrying no sound save its own mournful song. Yet Eve perceived the almost imperceptible tremor in the snow beneath his worn boots, a subtle vibration that hinted at the distant rumble of an engine, a low thrumming that resonated through the frozen earth. With a slow, deliberate movement, Eve lowered his hand, a silent signal understood instantly by the two figures behind him. There was no need for words, no whispered instructions in the biting wind. Their bond had been forged in countless impossible situations, a shared language of hardship and survival etched into their very beings. He turned, his slight frame barely disturbing the powdered snow, and pointed northwest, then gestured with a subtle flick of his wrist, indicating a wide, arcing path away from their current trajectory, designed to circle around the Hydra unit's perceived advance. Their steps, already precise and economical, became even more measured, their heavy winter boots finding purchase on the icy crags and packed snow with uncanny quiet. They were no longer simply moving, they were flowing like shadows across the moonless canvas, each man a seamless extension of the leader's will, a silent, synchronized organism. The air grew colder, biting deeper as they descended into a long, shadowed valley. The wind, a relentless sculptor of the snowdrifts, shaping them into phantom figures that seemed to watch their passage. Hours blurred into a timeless sequence of footfalls and controlled breathing, each exhalation a misty cloud instantly snatched away by the biting air. The ambient light, if one could call it that, shifted subtly from the deep, inky black of the moonless night to a softer, almost bruised purple as the faint pre-dawn glow began to flirt tentatively with the horizon, painting the distant peaks in hues of bruised amethyst. They had navigated a labyrinth of wind-sculpted snowdrifts and sheer ice walls, their path chosen with meticulous precision by Eve, who seemed to possess an internal compass far more accurate and nuanced than any mechanical device. He finally led them to a hidden gully, a deep, narrow cut in the frozen earth, almost invisible from above, shielded on three sides by towering, ice-sheathed rock formations that seemed to cleave the very sky. Here, the relentless, biting wind was momentarily muffled, its mournful howl softened to a distant whisper, and the cold, though still intense and pervasive, felt less aggressive, offering a fleeting reprieve. He knelt, the heavy parka rustling softly, pulling a small, compact device from a pouch on his utility belt. A modified pair of binoculars with an integrated thermal imager. Its black casing dull against the gray-blue of the pre-dawn snow. Their descent continued, a deliberate, almost glacial flow further into the long, shadowed valley. With every step, the cold intensified, not just as a sensation, but as a palpable, heavy presence, a suffocating blanket that pressed against their lungs with each shallow breath. The air itself seemed to crystallize around them. Each exhaled cloud of vapor hanging like a ghostly plume for a prolonged moment before reluctantly dissolving into the vast, silent expanse. Snow, undisturbed for what felt like eons, offered no true comfort, only a treacherous canvas of shifting contours under their heavy boots. Steve, his smaller frame almost lost within the multiple layers of his practical, albeit tattered, winter uniform, moved with a calculated grace that belied his apparent frailty. His gloved hand, though insulated, could still discern the raw, piercing cold of the environment as it brushed against the icy surface of a massive, ancient rock face. After what felt like an eternity of careful, measured movement, they found a temporary vantage point, a natural alcove carved into the sheer rock face, offering a crucial sliver of cover from the relentless wind and the vast, inhospitable landscape. Here, the immediate silence was broken only by the soft, almost imperceptible hiss of melting frost from the rock overhead, a subtle reminder of the extreme temperature contrasts. Steve knelt, settling his weight carefully, and with practiced ease, pulled a worn, leather-bound map from an inner pocket of his heavily insulated coat. The material, though aged, was still supple, carefully preserved against the harsh elements. His fingers, thin and nimble despite the thick gloves, moved with a delicate precision, tracing the contours of the valley, marking potential Hydra patrol routes, and identifying defensible positions for future operations. This map wasn't just a geographical guide. It was a living document, covered in handwritten annotations, scribbled calculations, and a complex web of symbols that only he could fully interpret, a testament to countless hours spent poring over fragmented intelligence reports. As Steve continued his meticulous study of the map, his mind fully engrossed in the strategic intricacies, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor reached him through the frozen ground. It wasn't the rhythmic thrum of his own heartbeat or the distant whisper of the wind. It was a low, resonant thrumming that was distinct, unnervingly steady, and completely artificial. It was the same distant rumble he'd felt earlier, a subtle vibration that now, with their deeper penetration into the valley and the increased silence, registered slightly clearer. like a whispered secret, making its way across the vast, empty spaces between the towering ice formations. This vibration was too consistent, too powerful to be natural. It spoke unequivocally of heavy machinery, of a powerful engine pushing through the snow, far deeper into the valley than any allied intelligence had dared to anticipate. He slowly and deliberately folded the map, returning it to its secure pouch with movements that were economical and precise. His eyes narrowed, not in anger or fear, but in a cold, calculating assessment that seemed to pierce the darkness. His thin fingers, with a delicate precision, moved across the map, tracing the contours of the valley. A moment of stillness, a silent calculation unfolding behind his weary eyes. Then his hand paused, hovering over a particularly dense cluster of markings near a frozen river bend. It was a nexus of Hydra patrols, a seemingly impregnable network. Yet, a subtle, almost invisible flaw, a temporal rhythm in their movements, began to emerge from the chaos on the page. With a nearly imperceptible nod, Steve reached into another pocket, retrieving a slender, almost needle-like stylus. Its tip, barely thicker than a hair, met the aged paper with a soft, dry whisper, sketching a new, audacious route, a ghost path between the known patrols, a testament to his unique ability to see patterns where others saw only impenetrable defenses. The air in the alcove, cold and still, seemed to hum with the quiet intensity of his focus. The only sound the faint rustle of the map as he made his intricate adjustments. With the new path carefully delineated, Steve gently folded the map, securing it once more within the deep confines of his coat. His gaze, no longer fixed on the paper, lifted towards the narrow opening of their temporary shelter. The relentless wind, though dulled by the rock, still carried a raw, piercing chill, a constant reminder of the unforgiving environment. Beyond the alcove's mouth, the vast, silent expanse of snow-covered peaks stretched into the distance, a formidable, indifferent guardian of the secrets held within its valleys. But then, a subtle shift in the air, a faint, rhythmic thrum, almost imperceptible against the wind's howl, registered in his acute awareness. It was a low, mechanical pulse, distant but growing, a sound that spoke not of nature's indifference, but of an encroaching, hostile presence, an echo of Hydra's vigilant grip on this desolate land. The subtle thrum, now a distinct, rhythmic pulse, resonated through the cold rock, no longer distant, but steadily closing in. Steve's lean frame stiffened, his eyes, sharp and intelligent, narrowed as he mentally mapped the sound's trajectory against his pre-established infiltration routes. His hand instinctively went to the folded map, then paused. A different calculation, unfolding in his mind. The wind outside seemed to recede, replaced by the growing hum of Hydra's presence, a mechanical heartbeat in the wilderness. He wasn't surprised, merely confirming a suspicion. A new variable demanding immediate adaptation to his carefully laid plans. The quiet intensity of his focus deepened, his breath a controlled, almost imperceptible whisper in the still air of the alcove. With a deliberate, measured movement, Steve retrieved the map once more, its familiar creases unfolding silently in his gloved hands. His gaze swept over the intricate lines, the penciled annotations, now seeking a specific point of convergence, a weakness in the encroaching pattern of the thrumming sound. He traced a finger along an uncharted crevice, a ghost path he had noted but hadn't fully accounted for, now reconsidering its potential as a diversion or an escape. The chill air of the alcove seemed to sharpen his senses further, his mind working with a quiet, almost cold precision, preparing for the inevitable encounter. The stark reality of their situation, against the overwhelming might of Hydra, settled upon him, not as despair, but as a challenge to be met with cunning. His fingers, nimble and sure, moved from the map to the worn vibranium shield strapped to his back. He adjusted the leather straps, ensuring its position was perfect. Its familiar weight, a comforting presence, despite its tarnished surface. This wasn't a weapon for brute force, not for him, but a tactical instrument, a silent protector, and occasionally a tool for deflection or distraction. The rhythmic thrum grew louder still, now accompanied by a faint, distant grinding sound, indicating heavy machinery on the move. Steve took a deep, steadying breath, the chill of the air filling his lungs. A final moment of calm before venturing out into the exposed, snow-covered expanse, where Hydra's patrols now surely focused their attention. With a barely perceptible nod, a silent affirmation of his altered strategy, Steve folded the map once more, tucking it securely into a waterproof pouch on his belt. The fabric of his worn uniform, softened by countless treks, made no sound as he adjusted its fit, his movements economical and precise. The low thrum outside intensified, now accompanied by the faint, rhythmic clatter of distant machinery, a sound that spoke of automated patrols drawing nearer. From a slender, reinforced loop on his utility belt, Steve carefully drew a thin, flexible wire, its tip glinting faintly in the almost absent light. A tool designed for silent entry, not brute force. He cast a final, deliberate glance around the small, cold haven of the alcove, confirming nothing was left behind. Then, with a measured turn, Steve faced the narrow, shadowed maw of the ghost path, the uncharted crevice, now his chosen route, the passage seemed to swallow the already scarce light, promising a silent, unseen journey into the heart of the enemy's territory. And so the story ends. If you enjoyed this journey through an alternate universe, subscribe for more lore explorations every week. Drop a comment with a topic you would like us to cover next. Sleep well. The thin wire, almost invisible in the faint light, extended from Steve's nimble fingers, seeking purchase. With a soft, practiced motion, he threaded it through a narrow seam in a reinforced utility panel. The faint click of a tumble release, barely audible over the intensifying hum from outside. A small section of the metal panel shifted inward, revealing a sliver of darkness beyond. The rhythmic clatter outside grew in clarity, closer now, a mechanical heartbeat against the wilderness's quiet pulse. With the panel now ajar, Steve eased himself through the narrow opening, a silent shadow slipping from the alcove into the cool, confined space behind. He found himself in a service conduit, the air thick with the smell of ozone and stale, recycled oxygen. Metallic pipes snaked along the walls, slick with condensation, their cool surfaces brushing against his uniform as he moved. The mechanical clatter, once distant, now reverberated more distinctly through the cramped passageway. A constant, low thrumming that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. Steve pressed onward, his worn combat boots making no sound on the grimy floor. The conduit twisted and turned, a labyrinth of dim passages. He could feel the vibration of heavy machinery through the metal underfoot, growing steadily louder. Then a new sound filtered through the metallic hum, the faint, guttural murmur of human voices, muffled but undeniably close. Ahead, a subtle, almost imperceptible reddish glow bled from a slotted vent, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the rhythmic pulse of the distant engines. The low thrumming intensified with each carefully placed footstep, echoing softly against the metal walls. Steve's uniform, a modified blend of stealth fabric and reinforced canvas, absorbed the condensation from the pipes, clinging lightly to his thin frame. His senses, sharpened by years of compensating for his physical limitations, mapped the unseen labyrinth around him with uncanny precision. He noted the subtle shifts in the ozone smell, richer near certain junctions, carrying the metallic tang of high voltage, then drier in others, hinting at air purification systems. The metallic pipes themselves, a cool, slick network, varied subtly in their vibrations, some humming with the steady, deep flow of unseen liquids, others carrying only the faint, dry rush of pressurized air, whispering tales of distant ventilation shafts. His eyes, accustomed to the deep shadows that only true darkness could offer, discerned the faint glint of maintenance markings etched into the conduits. Tiny symbols that, to an untrained eye, would seem like random scrawls, but to Steve were a sparse, complex diagram of the facility's internal workings. The conduit opened slightly, leading into a wider, vertical shaft, filled with a complex web of larger pipes and power cables, ascending into unknown heights and descending into deeper levels. A soft, continuous hiss emanated from a cluster of steam pipes overhead, adding a new layer to the facility's auditory landscape. The air grew slightly warmer here, a subtle shift that indicated proximity to an energy source or a heavily utilized section of the base. Steve paused at the junction, his back pressed against the cool metal of the conduit wall, listening intently. Below him, a faint, pulsing glow hinted at distant activity, casting fleeting, spectral reflections on the polished metal surfaces of the shaft. He could make out the distinct, heavy rhythm of large generators now, a low rumble that vibrated through the very structure he leaned against. With a silent deliberation, Steve chose the downward path, noting the slightly less robust construction of the grates and the fainter sounds of human activity below. The hum of the generators, while still audible, receded somewhat as he began his descent, replaced by a softer, more irregular clinking sound, like distant tools. He produced a small, specialized toolkit from a hidden pocket on his utility belt, not a weapon, but a collection of lock picks, miniature cameras, and sensor overrides. His slender fingers, though lacking the grip strength of a super soldier, possessed an unparalleled dexterity, capable of delicate manipulation. He spotted a less secured access panel, half hidden behind a thick cluster of insulated power conduits, near where the faint clinking originated. It was an older model, a relic, perhaps, from an earlier phase of construction, overlooked in newer security upgrades. The deep thrum of the generators was a living thing, reverberating through Steve's bones, a constant companion to the unseen world around him. He could distinguish not merely its volume, but its very cadence, a complex, multi-layered rhythm that spoke of several powerful machines working in concert, some maintaining a steady output, others cycling through heavier loads. The pulsing glow below, a soft, diffuse orange that painted the undersides of the lowest pipes, seemed to synchronize with the deeper beats, hinting at a central power nexus, perhaps a critical energy source that fueled the entire Hydra base. His ears, more than his eyes, were his true map in this subterranean labyrinth, picking out the subtle shifts in frequency, the almost imperceptible changes in air pressure that accompanied the opening and closing of distant valves or heavy doors. Each faint sound was a breadcrumb, leading him deeper into the facility's operational heart. He imagined the vast, humming chambers below, a hive of activity hidden beneath layers of concrete and steel, all dependent on this rhythmic, pulsing energy. With a mental blueprint of the facility's power distribution now forming, Steve began to move. His thin fingers, surprisingly strong and calloused from years of compensatory effort and clandestine training, found purchase on a series of thick conduits running horizontally across the shaft. He began a slow, deliberate descent, a silent spider in a web of steel. Each movement was a calculated risk, his light weight an advantage, yet his lack of bulk meant a greater reliance on precise balance and unyielding grip. The air currents, previously a uniform flow, now shifted, bringing a faint, almost imperceptible smell of oil and burnt ozone from a level far below. His eyes, now more accustomed to the deep gloom, discerned a large, circular grate set into the wall of the shaft. Perhaps 3 stories down, it was slightly ajar, almost imperceptibly, promising an entry point into a new, unseen section of the Hydra complex. The journey to the grate was slow, each foot and hand placement meticulously checked. Reaching it, Steve pressed his ear against the cool metal, detecting only a faint, rhythmic hum from within, softer than the generators, but distinct. The grate itself was a heavy, bolted affair, clearly designed for infrequent access, not easy passage. One of the thick bolts holding it in place was slightly loosened, a tiny oversight, perhaps, or a deliberate signal. He ran a sensitive fingertip over the rough ironwork, feeling for any tripwires or pressure plates, finding none. The air now flowing from the crack was different, still cleaner, colder, with a faint, almost clinical scent, overlaid with something metallic and vaguely sweet, like ozone after a summer storm, but artificial. His light weight, a perpetual burden in a world built for strength, became a fleeting advantage as Steve descended. Each thick conduit, cool and metallic beneath his calloused fingers, offered a sturdy hold. The rhythmic hum from below grew subtly louder, a deep, resonant thrumming that seemed to vibrate through the very steel he clung to. He moved with the precision of a dancer, his every muscle tensed, not for brute force, but for perfect balance and minimal strain. The faint smell of oil and burnt ozone intensified, becoming a more distinct, acrid note in the stale air. It spoke of a place of heavy industry, of power generation, and perhaps grim experimentation. With his feet finally resting on a lower crossbeam just above the grate, Steve took a moment to study the entrance. The grate itself was heavy, secured by thick, rusted bolts, but but the slight separation from the shaft wall suggested a weakness, perhaps hastily sealed or intentionally left with a flaw. He ran a gloved hand along its edge, feeling the cool, rough metal. There was a subtle give. He braced himself, inserting the edge of a specialized, hardened pry tool. A slender piece of reinforced steel he'd fashioned himself into the narrow gap. The effort was immense, requiring every ounce of his concentrated strength, applied not through bulk, but through leverage and precise, controlled force. The opening was just large enough for his slender frame. He slipped through with practiced ease, his movements fluid and silent, like a shadow detaching itself from the wall. The new section was a tight, confined service tunnel, barely wide enough to stand upright. Its walls a dull, utilitarian concrete, textured and cool to the touch. The air, though drier, felt heavier, almost oppressive, and the metallic tang was now undeniable, mixing with a faint chemical scent, sharp and unfamiliar. The pervasive hum of distant machinery was clearer here, the individual beats and whirs more distinct, though still muffled by the thick walls. A series of thick, armored cables, larger than any he'd seen in the shaft, ran along the ceiling, disappearing into the gloom ahead. With a low, protesting groan of rusted metal, the grate finally gave way. Steve eased it outwards, the heavy iron panel swinging on a single, groaning hinge, revealing a narrow, dark opening beyond. The scent of ozone, once faint, was now sharp and almost metallic, a testament to the powerful machinery housed within. He held his breath, listening intently, but only the distant, rhythmic hum of the facility permeated the new space, a deep, pervasive vibration that seemed to settle into the very bones of the structure. The path forward was less a welcoming doorway and more a clandestine slit in the world, inviting only the most determined. Steve carefully slid through the newly created aperture, his slender frame just barely fitting between the rough edges of the iron and the cold, unyielding concrete of the shaft wall. The air on the other side was noticeably warmer, thick with the smell of hot metal, and something vaguely antiseptic, hinting at the sterile yet dangerous nature of Hydra's interior. He landed softly on a narrow, graded catwalk that stretched into the impenetrable darkness, a faint glow emanating from somewhere far ahead, reflecting dully off the damp, metallic surfaces around him. Each soft step on the metal grating echoed subtly, a small, rhythmic sound in the otherwise quiet, cavernous space. His eyes, now fully adjusted to the perpetual dimness, began to discern the scale of the chamber. It was a vast, multi-tiered space, a colossal engine room perhaps, filled with enormous, humming conduits and intricate networks of pipes that snaked across walls and ceiling like metallic vines. The rhythmic thrumming from below intensified here, a deep, resonating pulse that permeated the very air. Far below, bathed in the faint, flickering amber glow of unseen machinery, massive cylindrical generators churned slowly, their immense power palpable even from this vantage point. This was the heart of something significant, a nexus of Hydra's power, demanding not brute force, but careful, strategic navigation. Steve began his careful journey along the narrow, graded catwalk. The faint glow ahead seemed to recede and shimmer with each soft, deliberate step, a tiny beacon in the immense, unseen chamber. The air, thick with the scent of ozone and heated metal, hummed faintly, a low vibration that resonated through the grates beneath his worn boots. He reached out a gloved hand, feeling the rough, damp concrete wall beside him, orienting himself in the profound darkness. His eyes, though keen, strained to pierce the veil, seeking any detail beyond the immediate metallic path. After several minutes of measured movement, the catwalk gently curved, opening into a slightly wider section that allowed a fleeting glimpse of the cavern's true scale. The distant glow strengthened just enough to paint the outlines of colossal, shadowy shapes along the walls, immense conduits, and what appeared to be suspended platforms, all lost in the deep blue-black beyond the immediate light. The rhythmic hum intensified subtly, revealing itself as a complex chorus of whirring gears and heavy, piston-like exhalations, a mechanical heart beating in the hidden depths. The path continued its slow descent, guiding Steve towards the increasing illumination. Soon, the source of the glow resolved itself, a large, circular console, its top surface a mosaic of softly lit display screens and delicate controls. Bathed in a muted amber light, it stood on a slightly elevated platform, radiating a quiet, focused energy, its light painting gentle reflections on the damp, metallic floor surrounding it. Beyond the console, a heavy, sealed door, reinforced with thick plating, stood guardian, suggesting the true prize lay deeper within this fortified chamber. Steve edged closer to the source of the rhythmic hum. The faint glow ahead resolved into arrays of indicator lights, and the dull gleam of polished steel, revealing more of the vast chamber. The mechanical heart, once just a sound, now began to take shape, a towering engine, its intricate gears and pistons moving with a ponderous, almost hypnotic slowness. Each exhalation from its vents released a brief, warm puff of air, carrying with it a metallic, oily scent that mingled with the existing ozone. The scale of the machinery was immense, dwarfing even the catwalk he walked upon, a testament to Hydra's formidable industrial might. As Steve continued his slow approach, the purpose of the colossal engine began to suggest itself. He noticed subtle currents of air funneled through the chamber, and the gleam of unfamiliar energy conduits snaking away from the engine's base, disappearing into further depths. These conduits weren't merely power lines. They seemed to throb with a faint, internal light, like veins of concentrated energy. His gaze followed them, past the immediate monstrous machinery, to a lower level of the facility, glimpsed through gaps in the grating, where more complex, smaller stations hummed with a different, higher-pitched frequency, hinting at experimentation or processing. The warmth intensified slightly as he neared this intricate network. The sheer scale and complexity of the Hydra operation pressed in on Steve, a silent testament to the challenge ahead. He paused, his lean frame leaning gently against the cold concrete of the wall, absorbing the rhythmic thrum of the machinery. His mind, sharper than any weapon, began to piece together the implications. This was not merely a base, but a core production or research facility, hidden deep within the earth. His mission, already daunting, now seemed even more critical and intricate. He scanned the labyrinthine structure, searching for weak points, for access routes, for any anomaly in the perfect, menacing rhythm of the engine. His eyes narrowing slightly in the dim, amber-highlighted space. Steve's eyes, keen and analytical, even without the benefit of enhanced vision, traced the intricate path of the pulsating conduits. These vital arteries of energy, woven through the vast chamber, pulsed with a gentle, almost internal light, a deep, resonant amber that seemed to breathe in slow, deliberate rhythms, like the measured beat of a hidden heart. These powerful veins of concentrated energy flowed not just to the towering engine directly above, but also branched downwards with deliberate intent, funneling into the smaller, more refined stations positioned on the lower level. Each station, glimpsed with careful precision through the gaps in the grating of his catwalk, presented a cluster of polished metallic surfaces, adorned with intricate dials and softly glowing screens, all arranged with meticulous precision and an almost artistic symmetry. The air here was not just warm, but carried a subtle, almost sweet, metallic tang, a distinctly different aroma from the heavy, industrial oil scent emanating from the colossal main engine. He observed with quiet focus that these lower stations weren't merely processing raw power. They appeared to be refining or transforming something, perhaps even something esoteric, with a quiet, determined resolve that belied his slight frame. Steve moved closer to the very edge of the catwalk, his hands gripping the cold, rough, and slightly grimy railing. Below, one particular station seemed to draw his attention, humming with a slightly different, more focused intensity than the others. Its central console displayed a mesmerizing kaleidoscope of soft, shifting colors on a large, concave screen, a silent, pulsating tapestry of light. The colors pulsed in perfect synchronization with the energy flowing through the primary conduits. A silent, complex language of power and information that, while indecipherable in its specific details, spoke volumes about the scale of the operation. He squinted, his brow furrowed in concentration, trying to discern the minute details on the screen from his challenging vantage point high above. Though the specific data displayed remained illegible at this distance, the overall pattern suggested complex calculations, perhaps even intricate simulations or real-time data analysis of an unknown process. His gaze lingered on the pulsing console, the shifting, silent colors on its screen offering no immediate, concrete answers, yet conveying an undeniable sense of immense, tightly contained power. He shifted his weight imperceptibly, his worn boots remaining silent on the cold, textured metal grating of the catwalk. The subtle currents of air now felt less like gentle breezes and more like deliberate whispers, carrying not just warmth and scent, but an almost imperceptible pressure, a palpable sense of something being compressed, focused, and meticulously controlled, following the trajectory of the most potent conduits, those that pulsed with the deepest amber glow and resonated with the most significant vibration. Steve noticed they didn't just branch out, they converged with undeniable purpose on a central point far below him. This critical area was less visible than the individual processing stations, partially obscured by additional heavy structural elements and by shimmering, almost ethereal energy fields. These fields danced and distorted the view, making it incredibly difficult to discern the exact nature of what lay beyond their veil. With a deliberate, measured step, Steve edged closer, his slight frame leaning against the cool metal railing, a shiver running through him that was only partly from the ambient chill. The distance lessened, and the shimmering tapestry of light on the concave screen below began to resolve into finer details. He could now make out delicate, flowing lines that charted complex, oscillating patterns, reminiscent of waves or intricate neural pathways. Small, glowing nodes pulsed intermittently along these lines, highlighting specific junctures or surges of energy. His sharp eyes, accustomed to dissecting complex diagrams and strategic maps, quickly started to piece together the visual data. The rhythmic pulses and synchronized shifts of color weren't random. They flowed with a discernible logic, mirroring the larger energy conduits, but with an added layer of nuanced information. It was as if the station was performing a sophisticated filtering, or purification process, separating distinct energetic frequencies from a raw, powerful current, channeling them into smaller, more refined streams for an unknown purpose, perhaps something esoteric beyond the hypnotic display. His gaze slowly lifted, taking in the full scope of the isolated station. Intricate glass tubes filled with faintly glowing liquids that swirled with a gentle, hypnotic motion, snaked upwards from the console, disappearing into the shadows of the machinery above. These tubes converged into a central, cylindrical chamber that emitted a low, resonant hum, far more subdued than the main engine, but equally potent in its implication of contained power and transformation. A silent testament to the facility's clandestine operations.